Hi, I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for joining me for my weekly guitar blog. It's December 27th, 2015, and this week we're going to do a lesson on basically how to play a guitar solo in 3 easy steps. Now, this week's question was sent in from Thomas. He's out in Camden, Maine, and he wrote in with this email. I started jamming with a few friends and haven't had much luck inventing some leads when we rehearse. There are a couple of songs in where I need to learn how to come up with a few lead guitar ideas. After several weeks of trying to play a decent guitar solo, I decided to send you a question on it. What are the areas I need to work on to be able to play a guitar solo in a song? From Thomas in Camden, Maine, USA. Well, thanks for writing in, Thomas. Playing a guitar solo can, essentially be broken down into a system that works around 3 main areas of study. Now, in order to play a lead within a piece of music, the guitarist needs to, first of all, have a good basic awareness of the guitar neck. If you don't know where any of the notes are on the fingerboard, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. And guitar players will also need the ability to both play and comprehend scales that are useful for the popular tonalities in music, and these would of course be major and minor tonalities. Lastly, players need to possess some of the foundational technical skills that are used to actually play a solo. Initially, these just can include simple ideas like some hammer-on pull-off ideas, bending, slide concepts, and of course vibrato. And that's just to name a few. But over time, more and more of those techniques will get developed. But once you have these soloing areas under some decent control, you should be able to perform a basic guitar solo in a song. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to zoom in on the neck, and I'm going to cover in detail how you can begin working on each of these areas. Well, the very first order of business for a guitarist developing their ability to perform a solo has to be that of getting to be able to recognize the layout of tones across the 6th and the 5th and the 4th guitar strings. Now, in my first exercise, I wanted to play through and just call out the fingerboard tones along these strings. Let's begin at the 6th string, which is, as you probably know, is open low E, 6th string open E. And then as we move along the neck, you have to be aware of the semitones, the natural semitones that are located between the E and F and the B and C notes. Immediately there's an E and F semitone. So the very first open tone you play immediately comes up to an F. There's no space in between, it just goes immediately E to F. And then we move up a whole tone to G, and then to A, and then to B, and then there's a semitone between B and C. And we have D at the 10th fret, and then we have another E octave at the 12th fret. And that's important too to understand that those double dots up at the 12th fret area, that's the 1 octave point to the open string. So let's run through those again. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. You should work on those until they're fairly well memorized. It's a pattern. All the notes have whole steps or 2 fret distances between them, except the E and F and the B and C. Those are the only semitones. Now when we move to the 5th string, which is open A, we're going to move along using the same pattern. So A to B has a whole step, so you have a fret in between. Then we have B to C at the 3rd fret, D at the 5th, E at the 7th, F at the 8th, G at the 10th, and then the octave of A at the 12th. And of course, again, there's that 12th fret octave, like we had on the 6th string from the E to the E. Now when we move to the 4th string, we've got an open D as our 4th string. Up a whole step takes us to E at the 2nd fret, and then F at 3rd, G at 5th fret, A at the 7th fret, B at the 9th fret, C, the natural semitone between B and C, located moving from 9th fret to 10th fret there, and then the octave of D at the 12th fret. So once again, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then the D octave. So that's the start of everything. It's just getting a handle on how things operate moving laterally along the guitar fingerboard. Well, once an awareness has been developed for the notes located on the lower string sets, we also need to make sure that the basic major and minor chord voicings are going to be able to be performed on at least the 6th string and the 5th string for their roots. So let's quickly run these down. We've got 4 main types of chords. They're often just referred to as bar chords. For the major off the 6th string root, here's the first one I want to show you. What you're doing is you're just barring right across with your index finger, and you're getting your ring and your small finger off of the 5th and 4th strings with your middle finger coming around and adding in that note on the 3rd string at the 6th fret there. Now, if you want to convert that voicing to minor, all you do is lift off on that middle finger and you generate the minor chord voicing. So it's a bigger bar that you're doing across all 6 of those strings because you need to get that 3rd string. It's part of the bar. But that's the minor chord voicing that I think you really should know. When we move to the 5th string root, the major can be sometimes a little bit difficult. You have to flatten your 3rd finger down. And that's your major bar chord off the 5th string. You can see I got my root with my 5th string. We played with index finger, and then the 3rd finger laying flat to generate those other tones. To generate the minor, what you do is you have to individually finger everything off of that 5th string. So there's your root on the 7th fret area. You got your ring and your pinky fingers. And then you got this middle finger coming up there on the 2nd string. So you got index, the 3rd finger, the small finger, and then you got your middle finger up on the 2nd string. And that's generating your minor color. So those are the 4 chords. You've got a major and a minor off 6th string, and you've got a major and a minor off 5th string. Now these chords are absolutely integral for guitar players to be able to play because they're going to allow the guitarist to have free access along the entire range of the guitar fingerboard. They're a lot different from how we view and apply our common 1st position chords that we learned down here, the open area of the neck. Because those are sort of locked up and they're locked down in that region, but when you're working with bar chords, they're movable. They flip around at different locations on the neck. And that's kind of the same way that we utilize scale patterns and scale layouts. They slide around and utilize different roots along the fingerboard as well. So learning these bar chords starts getting you to have a better handle on how the scale layouts operate as well. So if you know these bar chords too, you can literally play hundreds of common pieces of music because out of these open sets, which are good to know as well, but you don't have a lot of sharp and flat chords. If you need a B flat or something, it's kind of out of the scope of those chords. But if you have a major chord in one location and you know that wherever you place that major chord, if you need it as a flat, like a B flat, just pop that version, that 6th string root bar chord into the 6th fret area, and you got B flat major. And if you need it down off of A flat, you can drop it down a whole step or whatever. It's really easy to get the type of quality and chord root that you need. But also what this does is it helps us gain an awareness for the root note locations and how these chords behave within a song. Now, what I want to share with you here is sort of a secret here about how you're going to be looking initially at playing some solos and tunes. Let's say when you're moving into a solo section in a song, it's almost a 90% guarantee that the first chord that you hear is going to be the root chord or the home chord of that guitar solo section. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say you're moving into the solo section of the tune that you have to play a guitar solo on. And the first chord in that new section where you got to play that solo happens to be a B minor chord. Well, it's pretty much 90% chance that the scale that is going to operate for you for creating that guitar lead is going to be B minor. That's just a generalization, but like I say, 90% of the time, that's how it's going to operate. So the guitarist has to understand, where they're headed to for the home chord to select the scale they're going to use for the guitar solo, and base it off the roots generally of these chords. So if you don't know these chords, you're really in a lot of trouble because you don't understand where your roots are coming from. Let's say you're going into a solo section of a tune, and in that solo section, an A major chord is the first chord that starts things off. Well, again, it's probably a 90% chance that the scale that you're going to need to perform the solo is going to be based off that chord. So you're going to need an A major, style of solo scale to play the solo. So maybe that's A major pentatonic or whatever. But this is why these chords, for a secondary reason, aside from the good ideas they give you for rhythm guitar, it's a secondary reason why they're so important for being able to execute your leads along the neck. So let's wrap this section up and head to the next section, which is really going to be getting into some scale concepts. Well, next we need to look over the important scale types that are most commonly used in the early days of performing guitar solos. As you might have guessed, these would be the major and minor pentatonic scales. It's the most common scale type that's used in soloing when people first get started on guitar. Now in our lesson here, I wanted to run through a couple of really common patterns for these scales based upon the 6th guitar string. And these would be patterns that are often called along the neck shapes, since their layout is more lateral than it is vertical. It's just these scales tend to be a little bit more useful in the early days of learning how to play some lead stuff rather than the vertical shapes. First, let's check out a G major pentatonic scale based off of the 3rd fret, 3rd string. Sounds like this. Okay, here it is again. That's covering the sound of major. The next one I want to go ahead and run through is the popular G minor pentatonic scale based off the same note. Here's again. So what I would highly suggest doing is these shapes are very versatile. You know, once you learn them off the 6th string, it's not very difficult at all to go and bounce them over and start laying them out off of the 5th guitar string. You may have to make a couple of adjustments, but you know, really they're quite easy to go and bounce over. They give you a little bit more lateral movement, so you can go along the neck a little bit more. It helps really, you know, in one sense to take advantage of some phrasing sounds, you know, especially the slide ideas. So you get that slide idea, just popping in there really, you know, naturally, and also, you know, you can do some cool, you know, hammer-on ideas, you know, composed with the slides. So you can kind of combine those two ideas. It makes it really easy. And then the other thing I would, you know, highly suggest doing is, you know, continue experimenting with, you know, bend ideas and so forth, because, you know, as you're going along and learning locations, you'll find that there are certain places where you can really get a nice bend sound, and maybe instead of doing a slide, you can have some fun with that stuff. And, you know, like I was saying, you know, they really do transfer over off of the 5th guitar string fairly easily. So once you start, you know, getting these together, hear how it transfers over quite simple, especially the whole lower register of the scale. You just have to watch when you're moving between 3rd and 2nd string. So these are really common patterns. They're very helpful. I highly suggest getting them together a little bit more so over than maybe the in position. A lot of people know these sort of in position box patterns. You know, they're okay. There's nothing wrong with them. I mean, a lot of people do know them already, but they, you know, they still can't solo even though they know these. So it's sometimes a little bit more fun and gives you a little bit more inspiration to know the lateral based shapes. So from here, you know, now, kind of stress the importance of really knowing these scale patterns, some of these basic pentatonic scale patterns. Let's go to the final area, which is more of an application of these ideas. Well, the final area of this lesson that I want to cover is going to be that of an application direction of all these ideas. In other words, we need to take all the background knowledge that we've been discussing, ideas on the layout of our neck, understanding how chords are very vital for helping us, especially with our ears, to know the home chord, and that's going to give us the basis by which we will select the type of scale that we're going to use, and control everything off of those parameters, really. And that way we'll be able to have a decent, you know, idea of the direction we're headed to be able to play our leads and do our soloing. So in getting started with this more application direction, I wanted to discuss the idea of forming what I'll call a group or pool of notes that we're going to base things off of. And this means looking at the scale tones definitely within a smaller region, within a smaller, you know, area, group of the tones. So not so much of taking the whole span of the scale, however you're looking at the scale, whether it's, you know, within a vertical sense or whether it's, you know, larger lateral sense that we've been discussing. But looking in it at a way where it's more manageable for you, sort of chunking it down, you know, that less is more concept. One of the most valuable things I ever did when I was you know, going to music college is I had you know, a teacher that was really big. He was a blues player. He was really big into just looking at using a couple of notes and forming a lead with, you know, maybe 2 or 3 notes. And I had never really done anything like that before. I had always thought of, you know, scales in a much larger sense, and, you know, I got all these tones to fool around with, and I, you know, got a huge, you know, huge range on the neck. I went, you know, out of the perspective of the 80s, where we had lots of guitar solos, lots of, you know, flashy rock metal bands doing crazy stuff, and I just thought of that as soloing. You know, I always had thought of it up to the point of having this one blues player, you know, sort of sit down with me and say, hey, you know what, man, just grab 2, 3 notes. Try and make a solo just holding 2 or 3 notes. You know, just keep it really, really, really simple. You know? Just looking at a couple of tones and using more rhythm and feel and generating everything off of that direction. It may not feel very manageable in the beginning to do that, but you get a small pool of notes, and then you expand, and then things start really warming up to you in the way you're setting things up on the neck. Now, what I want to do, I'm not going to just use a couple of notes. I'm going to give you a line based at a G minor, and the line sounds like this. So I've got just a small selection of notes from that minor pentatonic of G. It's a little collection of them sort of between really the upper 4 guitar strings, mostly focused on strings 4th through to 2nd. Now, using this melodic statement, I want you to consider a couple of points here of going forward into the future. Now, number one, main thing is you have to realize there's a lot that can be done with just a small pool of scale tones. Small groups of notes can still do a lot for you to be able to lead you towards the world of creating guitar solos. And number two, in the beginning, it's much more important to learn how to generate feel and phrasing techniques than it is to memorize, large spans, flashy, licks and all that stuff. Just be able to have feel and phrasing because it's more natural. You'll be able to get through a solo section easier that way. There'll be really low pressure on you because you're not trying to create some kind of worked out, developed guitar lick line that you worked for hours off of your favorite, Van Halen album or something with. That stuff is great and all that. It's fantastic for your technique and all that. But that's a lot of pressure on you when you're live on stage those first few times as a new player, getting your band out there and trying to play that, you got to get that solo line off 100%. That's a lot of pressure on your shoulders to execute. So keep things simple. Have it more based on feel and phrasing technique with a smaller group of notes. And, the bottom line is if you can feel and phrase lines, you can solo. If you're always relying on that, long Eric Clapton escapade, that you learned years ago, or that crazy Eddie Van Halen solo, or that majorly crazy lick that you lifted off of a Jimi Hendrix album or whatever, that's more pressure on you. And you got to come along and play that solo than just taking, small pool of notes, small group of notes, like I showed you here in this guitar. Like I'll play it again. So there's a small group of scale tones there, and even with that little group of tones, man, you could solo for 2 or 3 minutes in a song if you wanted to. Just experiment, use your phrasing devices like slides and some bends and some hammer-ons and all that. And I'll just use those notes maybe for a couple seconds here and just play a little bit for you. So there you go. I just use those notes. It's really easy. You just keep, fooling around. You can hear I'm doing some slides and a little bit of hammer-on pull-off stuff, lots of vibrato because, I'm big into that. I always want to make a note sing. I had a guitar teacher ages ago that just really stressed that a lot with me. But you can tell you don't need tons of notes to do this. You don't need some huge group of tones, and you don't need to know 12 licks from Richie Blackmore and 12 licks from Eddie Van Halen, and you don't. It's great to study that stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's not absolutely necessary in the early days. You can take small groups of notes, make sure you understand what key you're in, make sure you know your tonality, whether it's major or minor, and with feel and phrasing you can solo. Well, the ability to perform decent sounding guitar solos needs some background study. The notes on the neck are important, and so is knowing a little bit about chord qualities and where they sit, since that will help you to understand the location of root notes and to test out whether you'll need to use a major or a minor scale to form your leads. But in the largest sense, guitar players need to be able to hear the home chords sound and have a region on the neck that will be the comfort zone for starting a solo from. That pool of notes where you're going to locate within that comfort zone area, combined with the ability to both feel out and phrase improvised lines, will end up being what will eventually get you the skills to be able to play solos. Anyhow, that's about all the time that I have for today. As always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and if possible, consider a small donation to help fund the Guitar Lessons project here. Every little bit helps. Otherwise, have yourself a really great week, and we'll catch up with you next time. Bye for now. I'd like to take a moment to mention another guitar video lesson project I've started. It's a unique guitar lesson approach that I'm doing online, and it's not like anything I've done before. Best of all, it's 100% free. I've called this approach guitar micro lessons, and they're a great way to learn a few new licks or riffs or chord shapes each week. Now, these guitar micro lessons are quick and easy to learn from. They're very short, with each lesson running between only 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes in length. They're published to YouTube from Monday to Thursday on my other Guitar Blog Update YouTube channel, and you can either subscribe to that channel to guarantee getting each new episode, or just visit the channel whenever it's convenient for you and check out the new micro lessons in the playlist on the Guitar Blog Update channel's homepage. If you'd like to learn the modes and really get an understanding how they can be used musically to write songs, play a solo, or compose melody lines, then you're in luck. My ebook, Using the Major Scale Modes, is a comprehensive manuscript outlining exactly how modes are used both in harmony and to compose melodic ideas. Over 50 pages of scale patterns, example progressions, and music theory all create one of the most comprehensive methods on the modes available. Using the Major Scale Modes is available for instant download in the View Our Products area at creativeguitarstudio.com.